Hey, how's it going, guys? So we're back with another Star Citizen video. If you're new channel, welcome. Today we're gonna be checking out another Star Citizen lore video. This one's called Complete History of Star Citizen Lore number 3, Conquest of Stars by the Astro Historian. So shout out and credit goes to the Astro Historian for the video. Now, I mean, his videos have been amazing so far. Like how it introduced the origins and the buildup of the companies that do exist today that build ships and all that. In last episode, we talked about like the discovery of systems and the benefits of the systems. Like some of them are habitable, some of them could be habitable if they're terraformed. Some of them are rich with like mineral deposits or gas deposits, things like that. But judging by the title of this one, Conquest of Stars, I'm guessing this one is going to be involving a lot of conflict and battle and things like that, because Conquest of Stars sounds like they're trying to expand through like means of aggression and means of force, should I say. So maybe we'll also encounter like pirates, bandits, and maybe vandals as well. I hope I said that correctly, vandals, yeah. But without anything else, let's just jump into the video.
With the Unification Wars won, humanity returned its gaze to the stars. Its burgeoning empire had barely begun to grow, but with a unified government and vision for space expansion, a new wave of human pioneers and explorers set out to conquer the stars. This is the complete history of the Star Citizen universe. Remember to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified when these release. If you wish to support the channel financially, then becoming a member or Patreon will go a long way. Now, let's return to the story.
Like I said, guys, I have a Patreon too now.
The Conquest of Stars. By 2402, the first settlements were built on the twin planets of Aramis, Vega 2, and Selene, Vega 3.
Almost 400 years
set
from now.
Its sights on the system, which showed great promise. Vega wasn't the only system rapidly terraforming. Redder, Caliban, Centauri, and even Oberon were also in full swing. The human colonial expansion era had begun.
Oh, my nose is running.
As these systems rapidly developed with the help of the centralized planning and control of the UNE, it also attracted new investments into terraforming. One of these investors was one Martha Shubin, a Seoul construction magnate who would found an investment group known as Shubin Interstellar. It wouldn't be long before her investments would pay off, and pay off massively. After a series of mergers and acquisitions, Shubin Interstellar became the third largest terraforming conglomerate in the UNE. It was the beginning of what historian Dr. Edward Nogel would call the Hidden Empire. It was during this boom when one Ruben Pardue, one of the first graduates from the University of Redder, would find his purpose. His graduate dissertation was on exploring the future applications of geohacking tech, also known as geoengineering. This would gain the attention of Titiana Terraforming, who convinced the young engineer to join their effort in Uriel. Pardue
Shubin Interstellar is unfamiliar to me. I don't think I heard that name before once. Well, I learned something new.
Quickly became known as an adept problem solver with a caustic tongue. He was arrogant, but rarely wrong, and as such, rocketed through the ranks of the terraforming team. Soon he would be asked to construct a network of tunnels under the planet's surface to house another team's experimental thermal device to warm up the frozen core. He spent months in the tunnels, obsessing over every last detail, and in his downtime sketched ideas for new equipment that would have been useful in his operations. Famously, one of these devices would go on to become the Pyro Multi-Tool, an indispensable part of modern space living. Unfortunately, on May 23, 2381, he was in the tunnels when a section of the operations hub collapsed, killing 37 and injuring dozens more, trapping Pardue in a connecting tunnel. When rescuers arrived, he was barely clinging to life and would go on to require his dominant left arm to be amputated. Titiana was obligated to cover the medical costs, and Pardue could have had the finest prosthetics available at the time. But he refused, letting his missing arm be a reminder of his failure. Ruben Pardue would quietly leave the company afterwards, a broken man in body and spirit. Luckily for him, an old college friend reached out upon hearing the news.
I do understand that like something like that big of an accident and losing an arm could be extremely traumatic and take a toll physically and mentally. but to rise above that is a huge challenge too. Like for instance, my old high school buddy right now, his name is Tyler Vargas Andrews. He's a retired sergeant in the Marines, and he was one of the Marines that was in the Kabul withdrawal back. Here, let me show you this too, guys. So back in 2021, August 2021, my morning band. This is for Sergeant Nicole G. Tyler Vargas Andrews was also there as well, and he was also hit by the explosion, but he wasn't close enough that it killed him. But however, he did get hit by shrapnel, and if I read correctly, he also got hit by like ball bearings and things like that, and it caused severe damage to his body that he lost 2 limbs. So right now he's a double amputee. He lost his right arm and his left leg, but I've been seeing on his like Instagram posts and everything, he's doing really well. He's working out. He's moving forward. So that's the one thing I do admire about him. He shows great strength and character. His mental mind, like his will and mental strength, is just on another level. And I really do admire him. And I'm glad that he's like inspiring others, saying like, "Hey, I think I remember this post. He said like, I'm working out today. What's your excuse?" Because this man is missing 2 limbs, and he's like, "What's your excuse for not going to the gym or something like that?" But hey, Tyler, if you're watching this, it's good to hear from you again, and I hope you're doing really well. All right.
News and asked for his help with a new endeavor. Pippa Broussard took over Grey Cat Industrial from her father Otis in 2080.
Oh, Grey Cat. Yeah, no, Grey Cat.
Although she was the CEO, her father was still the chairman of the board and watched what she did closely. In order to get some distance between herself and her father, she used the completion of the terraforming of Croshaw to open a second plant on Angeli, moving her office away from Mars and the watchful eyes of the board. She hired partners to help her come up with new products for this factory. Rubin went right to work, pulling ideas from his time working on the Titiana team to create an armor that would have saved the lives of the workers who had died under his supervision, an armor that would have allowed him to keep his arm. This armor would become known as the Ariel armor and would be a huge success financially.
That looks
Pippa
cool.
offered Rubin a promotion to head up Grey Cat's engineering department, but he refused, not wanting the responsibility of lives heaped upon him once more. Rubin was there to work and wanted his works vetted by as many others as possible to ensure they worked. After the success of the Ariel, he would pull out his old idea of the Pyro multi-tool. While the Ariel was a great success, the Pyro was revolutionary. Grey Cat couldn't physically keep up with the demand for the device, which was needed more and more as humanity was not just exploring the stars, but calling them home. It was at this time that the first real divisions began to form inside the UNE government. The time of unification had passed, and now the debate was on just how this unified government should handle the issues of space exploration and settlement. These divisions mostly centered around how much control should the government have over the various far-flung colonies. This manifested into 2 political parties, the Centralist and the Universalist, both of which still exist to this day. The Centralists believe...
The reason I'm saying uh-oh is because as soon as there's 2 parties, there's going to be conflict, just like right now, Democrats and Republicans. So we got the Centralist and the Universalist.
in government regulation and spending, low tax rates, increased privacy laws, and less government spending. They want as little control as possible being held by the government over the people, believing what regulations and spending exist are used to ensure minimum control while giving maximum benefit to the people. This usually manifests with lower military spending and higher spending on infrastructure and projects. The Universalists believe in government control and increasing government regulations to ensure the government keeps its power. They prefer to lower taxes on the wealthy, cut expenditures where possible, and rely more on free trade methods to ensure the market dictates the way forward. Thus, typically, Universalists preferred a lighter hand in developing worlds compared to the Centralists, relying on the market more heavily. Both sides were hesitant to increase the power of the military, and as
Okay, so this is what I'm getting at. Centralist is more focused on like helping the people, and Universalist sounds like they're more on like helping the wealthy and also maintaining like a really strong grip on the market and also the government. And yeah, I just heard right now both are hesitant on helping the military, but it sounds like with the Universalists, how they're helping the wealthy and all that, they are a little bit more prone to corruption in a way. While the Centralists just sounds like it's more of a democracy, just like helping the people and all that. But I mean, that's just my observation. I may be wrong, but let's hear about which one is a little bit more hesitant on helping the military.
Both sides were hesitant to increase the power of the military, and as such, much of the UNE military forces were cut back to minimum levels, relying instead on local militia and security forces to act as peacekeepers. This also meant that the main role the UNE played was as a facilitator for exploration and settlement of systems, having a very light touch with anything outside of that purview.
So they didn't really have a strong military at the time. As more and more
systems were becoming terraformed and settled, nav jumpers and explorers continued to look for greener pastures. The next big find was always just around the corner. Humanity truly felt as if there was no limit to its expansion. However, by 2412, it had been almost 50 years since the last system was discovered, until an accident propelled the expansion to new heights. Elaine Victus was a famed astrophotographer who was doing a deep field survey about half an AU out from Vega's cometary cloud. Victus had set up his ship to go dark, a mode which turned off all thrusters to allow him to capture a maximum scan resolution. However, as he turned on his expensive and sensitive stellar camera, he found it wasn't able to starlock because of an imperceptible movement of the ship. Curious, he checked his IFCS systems to find out there was microns of movements on his ship, caused by being within 400 meters of an uncharted jump point. This dumb luck would lead to a movement which would spread humanity faster throughout the stars. The story and the experience of the famed photographer would inspire the public, who are now clamoring for their own experience in new lands. It helped that the system Victus had discovered was one of the most perfect systems humanity would ever discover. This K-type main sequence star had 3 planets.
Virgil.
The outer planet was a typical ice giant. The second planet was a smog world covered in thick clouds, which completely obscured the surface and rendered the world uninhabitable. It was the first planet that would cause such a stir. The planet was the best candidate for terraformation humanity had ever had. The soil was packed with super nutrients, which made the process of turning the world into a human-habitable one incredibly easy, allowing for the process, which usually took decades, to be only a few years. The spin doctors on Earth would name it Virgil to give it a sense of regal manifest destiny, as it resided in a region of space that scientists thought was inaccessible. When
the name Virgil does sound familiar, and the fact that it was discovered by accident, I mean, I think 2 systems the last video were also discovered by accident, so then again, to be honest, I'm not even surprised.
The terraforming process was completed, it became a lush, tropical world, a paradise world which would soon see its first city founded upon it, Kastak. Virgil's very publicly viewed, rapid development and colonization inspired more people to try their luck on these new worlds and to try and find more Virgils. This would lead to the creation of a government-funded program known as Project Farstar. Terraforming companies and nav jumpers who focused their efforts into the region around Virgil were given massive government grants in order to hopefully find similar systems to Virgil. However, the next system to be found would prove to be far more interesting than anyone had realized. In 2430, Wendell Dopes charted a jump point into a new star system, naming it Davian after his father-in-law. This wasn't odd for the time. The thing that made it so unique was the jump point leading to Davian originated in Sol. Contemporary science at the time theorized that there was no other jump points in the Sol system, so news of this discovery literally rewrote the science on what we knew about jump points. While this caused a lot of stir in the public sphere, the excitement quickly faded when it was revealed that the system was mostly unimpressive. It held 4 planets and an orange Type K main sequence star with little valuable resources, and only the second planet having marginal terraforming candidacy. Quickly, the system was relegated to a backwater frontier with little interest in settling it. This all changed in 2438. In that year, another system was discovered by one Adelaide Loris. Loris was a fugitive from the law, and it is likely she discovered this system far before this period and was using it to hide from security forces searching for her in Davian. However, likely in early 2438, she noticed nav jumpers exploring the area of the jump point and decided to take the risk to report her find and gift it to the UNE in order to get some leniency. To sweeten the deal, she even named the system after a law enforcement officer she knew well, named Marshall Cathcart. On June 12th of that year, one of those nav jumpers who was homing in on Loris's jump point, named Vernon Tarr, was close to finding it. However, due to the lucrative financial realities of discovering a jump point, and likely the knowledge of criminals like Loris operating in the area, Tarr was on edge. There was always a fear in the nav jumper community that they might be followed to their fines, executed, and their claims stolen from them. While there's no record of this, the false claims of Ashley Gahn in her reported discovery of Caliban and the fate of the Lindy may have inspired some paranoia amongst the now well-established society.
I mean, that does make sense. Because judging by all this, finding a new system, I mean, just the thought of it in general, like finding a new system is very difficult because, I mean, some of them were just done by accident. So imagine like actually trying. That's more difficult. But it makes sense. Imagine like you doing all that work, all that exploration, putting in so much time and money into finding it, and you eventually do find it. And then someone takes your life and someone takes all the credit of your entire work, and no one will remember you. So that does make sense. Like the thrill of finding a new system will be there, but however, the fear of what might happen if you do find one is also there as well. Who's actually following you? Who's actually targeting you? Things like that. So I do understand that. But I guess that is the risk of exploration and trying to find a new system and a jump point.
Society of nav jumpers. Tarr was taking no risks as a result. So when at 3:13 p.m. Earth Standard Time, his scanner showed a signature approaching him suddenly. So he acted out of instinct and fired at it. It was only after his shots missed that he realized what he was looking at was no ship of human design. Quickly, he relayed his coordinates and a brief description of his encounter to local officials, who relayed it to the UNE. Luckily for all sides, the strange ship remained stationary, the two sides seemingly staring at one another for a long while, before a UNE fleet under the command of General Neil Skolkovich arrived to take over the situation. Humanity had not found anything in the way of complex life outside of Earth. So they had discovered at least one naturally habitable world in the Nemo system.
So this is their first alien encounter. Wow.
But every other planet up to that point had to be terraformed to support life. So the discovery of not just life, but an alien civilization capable of spaceship construction and interstellar travel was massive. The ship was a type humanity would soon know as the Defender, and it housed a single pilot.
Wasn't it Banu or something like that?
It was bipedal and tall as it loped into its new abode on the UNE capital ship. A crew of specialists worked with the creature, who referred to itself as Onjeri, to which the team interpreted as just Jerry, a name the creature would wear as a badge of honor for the rest of their life. The process of translating the literal alien language of the visitor was slow, but Jerry proved to have a very affable nature and was very willing to work with the team. As a result, a now famous incident occurred when the team presented Jerry with a plate of various food for them to eat, to which they devoured every bit, and even the wrappers they came in. Tarr gave the whole account of his incident to the general, who made it very clear he was not to mention that he almost started humanity's first interstellar conflict to try and keep the situation under control, which Tarr obliged.
I mean, it's a good thing Jerry is very forgiving and does not hold a grudge, because he almost started a whole war with the aliens. And I'm really surprised that the first first interaction with aliens it was peaceful and working together, because I legit thought it was going to start a intergalactic conflict and it's going to lead down to a war. But So far, Jerry's very cooperative and very nice, sharing food, sharing knowledge, and also deciphering each other's languages. I really like that.
Being hailed as the hero who made first contact and not the trigger-happy nav jumper he was. Weeks went by with slow progress, as both sides struggled to understand one another. It seems that despite the reporting of the jump point to officials in Seoul, the Navy was not privileged to the information, as news traveled slow through couriers and relay stations. It was likely that no charts had been updated before first contact was made either, so all the Navy could do is find the general area of the jump point and wait. After 2 weeks of waiting and interpreting, additional alien ships arrived and made contact with the fleet. It would take months of work deciphering each other's languages, but eventually a breakthrough was made in early fall of 2438, when we learned that the species we had made contact with called themselves the Banu. The Banu
so it is the
tall,
Banu.
short-lived species, living not much
the Banu
beyond
Defender,
60 years
right.
of age. They possess no real biological
let's go back a little
species, living not much beyond 60 years of age.
Uphill.
They possess no real biological sex, with Banu able to choose to change their form to accommodate their young, while still requiring 2 Banu to accomplish this goal. Not much is known about their origins, as the species doesn't actually track their history, finding the practice wasteful and counter to progress. They are a gregarious and open people, with a society that is dedicated to accomplishing tasks with skill. Banu society is more...
Okay, so they don't live that long, barely beyond 60. There's no different gender or sex. They don't record their history because they think that it's going to hinder their progress into the future. Interesting. So the Banu Defender was the very first alien ship that was encountered by humans. Interesting. Hey, I'm learning a lot of new things today.
More decentralized, living in what amounted to a part family, part company known as a Suli, instead of the human concept of states and nations. Each Suli is dedicated to a specific task and works with other Sulis to ensure their products and services for every part of life were created. We also learned that they participated in what amounts to financial enslavement, with every Banu born into a Suli contract, then being sold to a rearing Suli, then being sold again to their first professional Suli, where they worked off their debt before being free to join or create any Suli they wished. This remains standard practice for the Banu, who often even buy members of other species and force them to work in their Sulis, though it is frowned upon by the wider Banu culture itself. Jerry proved to be an asset during this time of translation and understanding, though the truth of the purpose of his visit to human space proved to be almost as embarrassing as Vernon Tarr's near-fatal mistake. Jerry belonged to a bureaucratic Suli and found themselves bored, dreaming of being a pilot and an explorer, so they began embezzling funds from their Suli to let them out of their contract and into a position with an exploration Suli. However, their schemes had been found out, so in a moment of panic, Jerry stole one of the Suli's defenders and fled, eventually arriving face-to-face with the paranoid nav jumper.
So that's how that
Jerry,
happened.
Their discovery of a brand new species for the Banu to trade with gave him some leeway, and they were forgiven of their crimes. The first interstellar treaty between humanity and alien species, the Interstellar Peace and Trade Accord, was signed by both representatives of the Banu and the UNE in October 2438. The deal formalized political relations with the main government of the fractious Banu, known as the Protectorate, which was formed to deal with entities outside Banu space and culture. This treaty also opened trade between the two species, which would change humanity forever. In Davian, the small backwater settlement on known as Jata exploded overnight, as Banu traders began to flood into the system to barter and trade. The city grew on the back of this trade and began to flourish. However, goods and services weren't the only thing being traded on Cestulus. Shortly after the signing of the treaty in 2938, a repair Suli on the planet lit lamps and invited local humans to join them in a practice they called the Glow Festival. This was an infrequent practice done by the Banu to celebrate momentous occasions, where everyone is said to be part of one Suli, meaning Sulis would invite passing strangers to join them and give these strangers gifts to sell, and those strangers bring food and drinks to share with their hosts. This festival lasts for 34,000 Banu beats, or 2 human days, when the lamps run out of fuel. This was the first non-human cultural exchange since First Contact, and it quickly became as much a Davian tradition as a Banu one, spreading throughout human space as many traders saw the value in the practice to boost sales. However, there was still much consternation with this First Contact. The sudden and near disastrous First Contact threw the reality of just how unprepared the UNE was militarily into stark relief.
Of course.
Lucky that Tar missed his shots, and lucky that the Banu weren't hostile. Now that they knew they weren't alone in the universe, we feared we may not be the top dog we had always assumed we were.
I mean, that's how it is. I forgot. I mean, I don't know why this came to mind, but if you guys watched the Avengers, I mean, the one there was the fight in New York and all that. I remember Nick Fury saying they are building weapons of mass destruction from the Tesseract because of the discovery of Thor and Asgardians. Because he said not only did we learn that we're not alone, but we are outgunned. So that's why they're making more powerful weapons and things like that. So that way they have a chance of defending themselves. So I don't blame that this is their course of action, discovering that there is another race out there. But that means now there's a pyramid. Who's at the top of the pyramid and who's at the bottom? Because I'm willing to bet that if they did not take these drastic measures when they encountered the Vandal, then they would have been humanity would have been wiped out.
This reality was reflected when the UNE decided what to do with Cathcart. The system was entirely unremarkable, simply a star with a large asteroid field around it. However, it was donated to the UNE and was supposedly on the route towards Banu's space. It was instantly given to the Navy, who turned the system into a Class C military restricted system. They began plans to build a listening post and communications complex in the belt, as it was a single jump away from Davian. It was at this time when one man stepped into the limelight, a man of supposed long heritage of arming humanity for war, supposedly building and selling everything from crossbows to fighter jets to nuclear weapons. That man was Solomon Hurston. Solomon was the child of an entrepreneur, Janice DeLong, who had died just after he was born.
He looks like he sells muskets during the Civil War. I mean, look at that mustache. Man.
After her death, the wealth of the company she formed did not make its way back to the Hurstons, a sore spot for the young Solomon as he grew up and went into business himself. He became an independent middleman, buying products from factories and filling government contracts with those goods, and earning a profit from the difference. He never bothered making his own products until he found a contract requisitioning lasers for a series of military space defense platforms. Solomon knew the perfect company to source the lasers from, cheap and up to spec. The only issue was that that company was going out of business and wouldn't be able to produce the number of lasers in the required time. So, Solomon took a risk and purchased the company outright, renaming it Hurston Dynamics. His gambit worked, and the nascent UNE began to notice the small up-and-coming weapons company, relying more and more on the rising company to outfit the UNE Navy, beginning a relationship that exists to this day. 3 years after First Contact in 2441, another system was discovered through Vega by famed for-profit explorer Bao Yun. Him and his crew charted the new system and found 4 worlds with the only green band candidate mostly unremarkable. Thus, he sold the rights to the UNE, who named it Bremen, and marked it for development, beginning the terraformation process of Bremen 2 to become known as Rytif. This system wasn't seen as vital to the defense of humanity, did not reside on trade lanes, and possessed little in the way of valuable resources, but it did have good soil. So quietly, small numbers of settlers began arriving at the planet to claim and set up their initial homesteads, including the Kerner family, a family who would rise to have an outside influence on the history of humanity in due time. On March 5, 2445, Dominic Thappa, a UNE pilot stationed in the Cathcart system, was surveying the system when they found what they were looking for, a new jump point. This jump led to a bluish-white A-type main sequence star, 5 planets, and a mineral-rich asteroid belt.
Nexus.
This new system showed a lot of potential and held the second naturally habitable planet humanity had ever discovered, which was the 3rd planet from the star. It also had another planet with a potential for terraformation and a unique smog world with high quantities of nitrogen. There was one issue, however. The only way to get access to this new system was through the classified Cathcart system, an issue that would take time to address. In the meantime,
so there's a lot of benefits to the system and all that, but the biggest obstacle about this is entryway, and because it's pretty much restricted and classified.
Another system was discovered from Nemo, one that would finally connect Banu and human space, the Corel system. Discovered in 2449, this system was the result of dedicated effort to map and control the region of space between humanity and the Banu. You see, Davian doesn't actually border Banu's space. The Banu seem to not have revealed the locations of their systems during first contact, and as the closest Banu world from Cathcart was several jumps away and wouldn't be found for centuries, humanity was searching for a connection between the UNE and their new trade partners. It is likely that this system wasn't known to have a connection with the Banu space for at least 2 decades after its discovery, around the 2460s. It was then that the route between Corel and what is known as the Banu system of Gedon was likely first discovered. Corel has 4 planets in the system, the first having its crust blasted away by the yellow dwarf of the Sun, which was much like our own. The second planet is coreless, with no atmosphere but an abundance of mineral resources which were too costly to extract at the time. The third planet would be named Lo, and was the best candidate for terraformation, having mostly flat, dusty plains, and thus being perfect for landing facilities for ships. Thus, Lo would become the new hub of information and trade between humanity and the Banu. The main habitation area, named New Junction, built around the equatorial plains of Koth. This made the location reachable year-round, with little issues, other than the oppressive heat, which was constant. The final planet in the system was
it's just a hot
Castor,
planet.
and was technically in the habitable green band for terraformation, though just barely. Thus, early settlement was focused on Lo. By 2460, Hurston Dynamics had grown tremendously, buying up smaller companies, mines, and suppliers in order to meet the demands of its large portfolio of government contracts. It had become indispensable to the UNE, and as Hurston continued to show its competence in not only building weapons, but in doing so under budget, the more the government leaned on them. With such a massive company, Solomon needed to ensure that each new acquisition was run by someone he trusted, not wanting the fate of his mother to befall the family once more. Thus began the tradition of placing a family member at the head of each company. This would swiftly be put to the test, however, as Solomon's own son, Darrington Hurston, was placed as the head of a factory that produced mag resistors for railguns. It became apparent that the cost of manufacturing them was so high that his factory was barely breaking even. However, rather than improving production methods or negotiating for better material prices, Darrington cut corners. This choice ended in disaster when a malfunction in a Hurston Dynamics mag resistor caused an accident when a Navy railgun was fired, and resulted in the deaths of several Navy personnel. This incident ruined the reputation of Hurston Dynamics, who lost several important contracts as a result of the accident. The response from Solomon was swift and brutal. In order to save what little face he could, he swiftly and very publicly fired Darrington, vowing to regain the trust of the UNE, a promise he would end.
I think I could take a guess where this is going to go. So he fired his son because his son cut corners and all that, but because now Darren, he wants to, I forgot the names. But however, now trying to regain trust with the UNE because they are a huge client and all that. And they want to make sure they are able to get secure more contracts in the future. But the son is going to resent that. So I kind of see a potential feud or conflict coming in.
End up sticking to, though it would take years and drastic changes in policy. In the 2460s, nav jumpers continued to push the human colonial expansion era by discovering Farron in 2460. It was discovered by Pali Laumet of the nav jumper organization known as the Seoul Astral Exploration Society, or SAS. These were not ordinary adventurers, but highly affluent members of Seoul society, who dedicated themselves to exploration of new star systems. Their private efforts were behind much of the exploration that would occur during the colonial expansion era. Laumet and his crew were exploring the expanse of Croshaw for several months, and his crew were restless, and their supplies were dwindling. He surmised that they were days away from having to give up and return to Seoul, when one of his crew, Darcy Farron, noted that their quantum fuel calculations were off. Laumet double-checked the figures and surmised that the extra burn-off was due to the pull of an unmarked jump point. 2 days later, him and his crew became the first humans to jump to the system that Laumet named after his crew member who had brought him the information of the quantum fuel discrepancy, Farron. As was tradition with the SAS, when the ship returned to Seoul, Laumet gifted the discovery to the UNE as a philanthropic gesture. The UNE dispatched survey teams to discover the new system was loaded with riches beyond imagining. While the first planet is mostly known for being the subject of debate between scholars over it being either a protoplanet or a mesoplanet, Farron 2 and 3 were filled with exploitable resources, with Farron 3, soon to be known as Asura, being the best candidate for terraformation, as Farron 2 was coreless and had no atmosphere. Farron 4 was more dangerous, as it has a thick layer of metallic hydrogen, which acts as an electrical conductor and interferes with ships' avionics. This discovery created a gold rush into the system, as Earth was beginning to once again rise in population. With the resources of the galaxy now flooding back to Seoul, the seat of power was experiencing unsustainable growth. So when the UNE opened up settlements, a flood of corporate and private interests descended upon Asura. Soon, corporations and private citizens were exchanging heated words and, in some cases, rounds of ammunition over their land claims. These disturbances likely brought back memories of the chaotic times of Croshaw's initial terraformation, and as such, the UNE reasserted control and set up a lottery system to help arbitrate disputes. However, after the first drawing took place, a myriad of loopholes and flaws were uncovered that gave some parties an unfair advantage, likely including Shubin Interstellar and Hurston Dynamics, who had greatly invested in the planet. This took years for the UNE to unravel through investigation and lawsuits filed against the winners of the lottery. The government's impotent response to the debacle highlighted the limits of the UNE as an organization. The UNE was still very much tied to and favored corporations in the expansion of humanity throughout the stars. While groups like SAS helped keep much of these worlds in control of the UNE, the reliance on local security and militia for control of these new systems and the inability to really control these growing corporate giants like Shubin showed that a reform was needed to improve the aging Earth government. It is believed that the failures of the UNE at Farron was the beginning of the movement to reform the UNE into something new, to change the United Nations of Earth into the United Planets of Earth. This was aided by the growing number of humans living outside of Seoul, who did not have representation of their own, despite starting to develop their own unique cultures and identities. For instance, it was during this time that Spectrum began to blossom beyond its use in Seoul system as a network of communication to the various colonies. One of the first non-Seoul-based broadcasting companies began operation in Croshaw on Angeli, called Angeli On Air, and focused on life and news of the people from humanity's most settled colony world. Thus, the movement reforming the UNE was building from two camps: better control and more fair representation. In the meantime, Farron would explode in population and productivity. Resources began flooding out of the system into the rest of human space. Historian Ariel Rutt famously said that if Seoul was the Empire's heart, then Farron was the blood coursing through its veins, highlighting just how important the discovery was for humanity. The capital city of Asura is Tram, a city that was expertly designed to establish balance between nature and civilization. Large factories, refineries, and housing developments were interspersed with beautiful public parks. It famously was dubbed the City of Dreams by noted poet Leilani Toan. There was still some good news for the UNE, as the first real success of Project Farstar occurred in 2463, when Project Navjumpers Tabitha Castor and Jamel Normand discovered a jump point from Davian to the system that would become known as Kano. While the second planet showed some promise, the rest of the system was mostly a wash, with the first planet being a mesoplanet, the third being a smog world, and the fourth known as Pox, being a violent gas giant. Even then, the second planet was a water world, with polar ice caps being the only surface to land and set up settlements, thus limiting the population of the world and the planet itself being very difficult to terraform, the first attempt failing miserably. While Kano proved that Project Farstar could work, it wasn't a glowing success. Still, some development did happen, and in 2469, a Earth-flagged freighter named the Roustabout, owned by One Pyrotechnic Amalgamated, picked up a gravitational anomaly as it passed through the system. Little did anyone know that this small sensor reading would lead to one of the greatest tragedies in the history of corporate settlement, one that still resounds down the ages to the modern day. Unfortunately, by 2467, the bottom fell out of the economy. The UNE had overtaxed itself by trying to expand its influence. Between the debacle on Farron and the reorganization of the military, the budget was getting tight. However, two events would save the floundering government. The first was the discovery of the Ellis system. This was one of the largest systems humanity had ever discovered, with an astonishing 13 planets, of which 2 were terraformable, and 1 was the first world to not only be habitable, but contain an abundance of life. This find alone helped to revitalize the slumping economy, as it was sold to an up-and-coming developer named Gaia Planetary Services, who quickly went about terraforming the system. During the downtime, the workers took to racing one another over and through the gorgeous vistas of the various planets in the system. This would become famous long after the terraformation was complete, and would evolve into the most famous race in the galaxy, the Murray Cup. Despite the boon of discovery of the Ellis system, the government was still experiencing a shortfall, and the military was set square in the sights for being trimmed once more by both political parties. It didn't help.
Oh, by the way, guys, I'm really sorry if I'm being really quiet for like the last 10 to 15 minutes. I mean, I'm really just trying to take this all in, and I'm really enjoying it. So I just want to like put that out there in case you guys are wondering.
Help that the military had been expensively experimenting with developing and exploiting the restricted system UDS 2445309, the new system discovered from the Cathcart system. They hoped to test the new terraforming techniques to finally solve the issue of terraforming smog worlds with the second planet, while also terraforming the fourth. Smog worlds had proven to be a difficult situation for terraforming technology, as there didn't seem to be any way to stabilize and clear the atmosphere on a planetary scale within acceptable timelines. At the moment, this was not an issue, as an abundance of worlds were discovered that could easily be terraformed. But the UNE military was hoping to be able to crack the code with the system's unique high-nitrogen smog planet. Unfortunately for them, this process was expensive enough to be noticed by Congress and not successful enough to justify its existence. The Senate began to ask questions, and as an election was nearing, the military knew that there was no longer any way to continue their control of UDS 2445. So in a desperate attempt to keep its operations in Cathcart going, the military agreed to let the Senate sell the system, but only to a single entity. That way they felt it would be easier to control who entered and left Cathcart's system, as it was the only route into this new lucrative system. The Senate then settled on doing something unprecedented. Instead of giving the rights to a system while maintaining regulatory control over it, they opted to sell the system outright. This move would then give the government the funds they needed to cover the budget gap, while the company
That's actually a pretty cool name for a planet, the Red God.
that purchased the system would gain uncontested or monitored control over the system and its valuable resources. The company that was allowed to purchase the system was One Hathor Group, who settled the sale in January of 2468. It's important to note that this sale took place during the sale in January of 2468.
It says 2486, and he said 2468. I guess there's a typo right there.
It's important to note that this sale took place during the Universalist-controlled Senate, and filling the government's budget gap managed to help the Universalists maintain control over the government in close elections later that year. This would also become the precedent needed for the Senate to do something very similar later with the Stanton system. In 2473, another odd system was discovered, the Min system. This scientific anomaly was not a star system, but a planetary one, a single rogue gas giant with 4 moons. This is still considered odd, as it is one of the few systems to buck the trend of having no star while having multiple jump points. The mystery extends even deeper, as the thermal heating provided by the gas giant has warmed the second moon to not only be warm, but host bioluminescent bacteria, meaning there is life where there has never been a sun. A year later, Project Farstar scored its second victory with the discovery of the Tiber system. This was the first system to be discovered from Virgil, but sadly was not nearly as desirable. With only 2 minor planets without a nexus of jump points or any exotic resources, the system was once again seen as a letdown. Though unlike Kano, the second world had great potential for terraformation and resources, which attracted smaller mining firms looking for cheap resource rights. The next year, yet another system was discovered, this time by the famed UNE survey.
I mean, ever since the discovery of just one system, the discoveries of system has just been in a domino effect, just like one after the other, one after the other, one after the other. But most of them are pretty much having like the same story. One is habitable, one is terraforming, and one has a great amount of resources. The other one's not habitable. It's pretty much the same thing. Same thing when it comes to the systems now.
Survey ship, the Mythic Horizon, and its captain, Glenn Whitaker. This system had only 4 planets, and the only candidate was a high-risk one, a moon orbiting the second planet. The system earned the reputation for ruthlessness right away, as one of the Mythic Horizon's survey ships was caught in a meteor storm and destroyed near the third planet, killing the crew. While the Mythic Horizon would mourn, the system would earn the name Tyrannus, a name it would live up to in the years to come. By 2480, many issues were beginning to emerge in the UNE. With over 25 systems being discovered, the chain of communications and development was becoming untenable. It was becoming increasingly difficult for the government to even know what was going on in its far-flung colonies, and the rapid pace of discovery and settlement of systems was just increasing. Something had to be done, and an unlikely company would arise to help solve that issue. In 2480, a small spacecraft manufacturer was founded called Asiato Shipworks. Their spaceships were less than notable, but their pivot away from building ships was what made this small company stand out. 5 years later, the company rebranded itself as Asiato Comrelay and began to build communications drones. These drones took the place of the early nav jumpers and acted as relay messengers, traveling across systems and through jump points to transmit their data. Asiato would come to dominate this market and help to connect the growing empire as never before. Sadly, this would lead to the abandonment of the military presence in Cathcart, as the large station that had begun construction was quickly deemed unnecessary, as technology advanced to no longer require large communication relays so far from core worlds, thus leaving their complex station half-finished in the void to save money. By the end of the 25th century, humanity was in the middle of their golden age of exploration and colonization. But like children coming of age, we were heading towards a rude awakening. How very appropriate then was, at this time of humanity's ascension into interstellar empire, that an old morality tale first became published, a gift for Baba. Though originally from stories from the late 24th century, it wasn't until 2480 that the stories were condensed into a single tale.
Hold on. It wasn't University of... I don't know what that says because the rifle's in the way, but that's a big person too.
Until 2480 that the stories were condensed into a single tale penned by the author Fatima Reynolds Malik. The tale follows the story of 3 siblings: Selen, the sister quick to anger, Yella, the cool and calculated sister, and Damar, the brother who easily wandered off, getting lost and separated from his 2 sisters. The series of stories covered their adventures as they attempted to deliver the perfect gift for their grandmother Baba, who lived on Ganymede. But as they departed their homeworld of Mars, their adventures would take them all over humanity's far-flung systems. The morals of the story differ, though the main theme is cohesion. Only through the combined efforts of all of the siblings are they able to make it out of one scrape or another. However, each one's unique quirks get them lost and in trouble at some point in the story. This story would find a place among the classics of children's literature, and in many ways mirror the realities of humanity at the time. As we let our anger, our coolness, or wanderlust get the better of us, we would continue to fall into more and more trouble, conflicts, corruption, and chaos. It was only through unity that we would find our way in the verse. So it was with the beginning of the human colonial expansion era, as we pushed the stellar frontier as one species, to not simply visit, but conquer the stars. Thank you for watching Chapter 3 of this long-running series. This takes an awful amount of research and time to complete, so if you're enjoying these, be sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon, and turn on notifications to know when these are released, and if you really want to help out, think about tossing us a few credits by becoming a member. I'd also like to thank the Patreons on screen now for their continued support. If you want to join them for as little as $5 a month, you can help support future videos and get early access to these videos as well. I'd also like to thank the editor for this episode, Uri, who, without their help, this would not be possible. I'd also like to shout out the artists who work on the music for these videos, New Soul, who have been making Star Citizen fan music for years. Be sure to check out both and their sites linked in the description. This is the most ambitious project I have ever attempted to make. I will be chronicling over 900 years of in-game history, much of it fragmented or incomplete, into a single long narrative line. Its purpose is to give better context to the events and universe of the game in a more linear timeline format, which is easier to follow. Lastly, there will be addendums, short changes added to this series as it goes, simply because retcons and additions to lore are common for a game in development. Thanks again for watching. Remember to like the video to help spread the word, comment down below with questions or comments, and subscribe for future videos. Like I say every time, remember, ex historia ad astra.
Okay, as usual, that was another great video, history of Star Citizen lore. Let's see, we are approaching 52 minutes, and this was another long video, but still, I had a lot of fun watching it, and it was great. So, basically, the last video was pretty much where the ball started really rolling downhill, and this one it was just rolling a lot faster, and the discovery and the trade with the Banu looks like that was the big pinnacle of this video, discovering new alien life and almost causing an intergalactic conflict. But good thing the guy missed, and Jerry did not take any offense to it. But I learned one really good thing about this. The Banu Defender was the very first alien ship that was discovered by humans, so that was really great. But anyways, this was a really great video, and as always, shout out and credit goes to the Astro Historian for the video. So thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hit that notification bell so you know when I drop another video. And also shout out to all my members, subscribers, viewers. You guys are amazing. You guys are the reason why this channel keeps on going and growing. So thank you so much for your support, guys. I really do appreciate it. So without anything else, I'll see you guys next time.